Hello and welcome back to the Sharlayan Forum. My name is Chris, and today I wanted to continue my recap series of the Final Fantasy XI story events. This time we'll be diving into the three-part add-on scenario stories of Abyssea. Once again, I give thanks to Corvana for their efforts in documenting the story of Final Fantasy XI and making this video possible. Without further ado, let's jump into the dimension warping story of Abyssea. Our journey begins, like many others have, in Juneau. As the adventurer walks down the busy street, a strange darkness covers the area, and particles begin to float up from the ground. Suddenly, a massive rift opens in the sky above us, a strange glowing orb emitting a flash of bright lightning. Seemingly no one else sees these events, and we stare on in amazement before we black out. As we wake up, we find a man in white, who introduces himself as Joachim, and tells us that we must be mistaken as no one else saw anything that we're claiming to have witnessed. However, as he walks away, he turns to face us, ominously telling us that there is no trick of the mind, but instead, it's an indication of our potential. He forebodingly tells us to come speak with him if we want answers. When we speak with him, Joachim tells us that what we witnessed is what he refers to as noise, a close encounter of two dimensions essentially brushing up against each other. He explains that normal folk can't see the noise, so that would mean that we are indeed extraordinary. Joachim theorizes that we have an innate attunement to the alignment of our dimensions, something that most people can't even perceive, which makes us a perfect candidate to witness the truth of what he's saying for ourselves. To this end, he gives us a Traverser Stone and asks us to visit one of the cavernous maws that popped up recently during the events of the Wings of the Goddess. He explains that with this magical stone in our hand, interacting with the maws may result in a much different experience than what we've had previously, but warns us that the stone will only resonate with the maws that are living, freed from their petrified state. He gives us a list of areas that might be a good fit and sends us on our way. We visit one of the maws he suggests and are indeed transported to another plane, a shadowed and dark world. After seeing that Joachim's claims of an alternate dimension do indeed seem to be true, we head back to him to learn more. When we return, he apologizes for keeping secrets, but explains that he is indeed not from our world, but the alternate dimension from which we have just returned. He calls this dark, shattered world Abyssea. He explains that some time ago, Abyssea was suddenly overwhelmed by a massive influx of horrible beasts, the skies turning from beautiful blue to blood red, and the heroes of the realm were slain one by one until only helpless civilians remained. Those who did survive this initial wave of devastation now live in complete fear, cowering from beasts and struggling to carve out a life for themselves in the now deeply scarred land. Joachim, recognizing that this is far from our problem, begs us to help, asking to be a glimmer of hope his people so desperately need. We agree, of course, and Joachim gives us a breakdown of how this universal crossover works. He explains that the Traverser Stones not only serve as a key that allows us into Abyssea, but also serve as an anchor of sorts, keeping us grounded in our true dimension. He explains, though, that there's a catch to this experience. If you stay for too long in the other dimension, your ties to your origin point are severed completely, meaning that you're now stuck in whichever dimension you currently inhabit. He tells us that this is how he and his friends came to inhabit Vana'diel. Traveling and staying for too long has left them unable to return home to Abyssea. Sensing our trepidation, he reassures us, telling us that modern Traverser Stones are now magicked with a failsafe, a detection method, if you will, that will automatically eject us from Abyssea if we start to approach this dimensional severance. After completing some quests in Abyssea, we return to Joachim, who tells us that he has someone he'd like for us to meet. Unfortunately, the mysterious character isn't here, and is instead at the Stone Circle in Lathine Plateau, and he'll only be there at either dusk or dawn. Joachim sends us on our way to meet him. Arriving at the Stone Circle, we are greeted by none other than Gilgamesh, the famous pirate leader of Nord. However, this Gilgamesh doesn't seem to remember us from our previous adventures, but he reveals a pivotal fact. He is in fact the Abyssean version of Gilgamesh, a separate being altogether from the one we know in Vana'diel. He explains that he'd heard legends and rumors of our exploits across Vana'diel and decided to seek us out to help save his home world of Abyssea. Gilgamesh explains that the border between Abyssea and Vana'diel has become extremely unstable lately, explaining the occurrences of noise that we've seen. He fears that without our help, the two dimensions will eventually crash together, leading to unknowable consequences. He tells us that he doesn't fully understand all the particulars of what's going on, and explains that we would be better served asking for clarification from a certain little lass, though he refuses to elucidate us on who he's referring to with this moniker. After we complete some tasks in Abyssea, we return to Joachim, who tells us that once again Gilgamesh would like to meet with us. We head back to Lathine Plateau, where Gilgamesh tells us about a group of adventurers in Abyssea that once aided in its effort to recover from their plight, a band of people operating behind the scenes to aid in the resistance, the so-called Champions of Abyssea. He explains that this group is, in Abyssea, comprised of the adventurers from Vana'diel, including our own alternate reality version, traveling the world and completing quests, battling evil, and attempting to save their world from its plight, much like we attempt in our own. He remarks that despite having met various people in Abyssea that are reflections of people that we know in Vana'diel, we've never met ourselves. He explains this in a simple fact. Our alternate reality version is nowhere to be found. They have no idea where they went, saying that there are thousands of possibilities for our disappearance, and none of them really seem to sound very good. He explains, though, that there are more pressing matters that demand our attention. Of note, the land of Abyssea has begun to break down in a strange, barely noticeable lattice pattern. He fears that the massive surge in monsters and the change of the sky is nothing compared to what may be coming on the horizon. The disintegration of the land serving as an omen for a far more ill event. He tells us he plans to meet with the little lass he had mentioned previously for more information. After completing some additional quests, we once again return to Joachim, who explains that Gilgamesh is looking to meet with us again. This time, however, his location request has changed. We head for the Hall of the Gods, where we had ventured before to foil the Zillard's plan. Armed with the mysterious meeting request, we head there, and then we find Gilgamesh, who tells us that it's finally time to introduce us to the little lass he's referenced multiple times. It turns out to be none other than Esha and Tarl, who had helped us stop the Zillard a few expansions ago, in this version of course being her Abyssean counterpart. She tells us that, unlike some, she is incapable of traveling through the malls to our world, so she must communicate through a veil of sorts using the energy that permeates the Hall of the Gods to bridge the gap between dimensions. She tells us that she wants to finally come clean and trust us with the secrets of Abyssea that she has kept guarded to herself for a very long time. She explains that the happenings in Abyssea are the work of none other than Promathia, the Twilight God himself. Both Promathia and Altana have existed since the beginning of time, but unlike Altana, Promathia desired a release from eternal life. He wished for a true and permanent death, and one day he finally achieved it. However, Altana was so distraught that she bestowed upon his body the light of the true crystal. This action shattered the crystal into 5 pieces, which created the mortal realms. The place where all of this occurred, the original home of the gods, is revealed to be Abyssea. This lingering will of Promathia has begun to slowly return him back to life, and since his destruction was the event that spurned on the creation of all mortal life, his resurrection would mean the undoing of that creation, wiping out all of mankind. Esha and Tarl explains that the horrible state of Abyssea is a reflection of the lives to be reclaimed by Promathia's resurrection, and as he begins to drain the land, the true crystal has also begun to regain its form and its long-lost light. Armed with this knowledge, we head back to Abyssea to continue our fight against the Shattered World. After some time, we meet back in Juneau with Joachim once more, who tells us that Gilgamesh has yet another important message for us. We head for the Hall of the Gods and meet with both him and Esha and Tarl. Esha explains that long ago, a multitude of dimensions existed alongside each other, always parallel but never crossing. However, Promathia's will has begun to drive these dimensions into one another, and is responsible for the horrible fiends that have been appearing in Abyssea as of late. Promathia's goal is to remake his shattered world, the one Altana stole from him when she drained the crystal. But to do so, he must eradicate all mortal life and reabsorb their scattered essences and rejoin it into one place. Esha explains that all paths here lead to Altayu, the celestial capital where Promathia most assuredly lies in wait. However, in Abyssea, all accessible paths to Altayu have been destroyed. The crags scattered about the land disappeared some time ago. Esha and Tarl then drops kind of a crazy bombshell on us that the secret to Abyssea's issues lie in none other than its moon. She notes that it's begun to grow larger recently, and because of this sudden growth, she believes that Altayu has begun to ascend there, on the moon's surface. Unfortunately, we have no way to get there though. All of the portals to Altayu and Abyssea have long since been destroyed. However, Esha and Tarl tells us about her hypothesis on the situation. One type of monster in particular sticks out in Abyssea, the extremely humanoid Cateray, who sprung up at around the same time that the moon began to grow. She can't really give a reason why, but she feels compelled to believe that slaying these Cateray will somehow give us a hint on how to reach Altayu. So she implores us to travel to Abyssea and lay waste to their numbers. After defeating all the Cateray, we meet with Gilgamesh and Esha and Tarl once more, and she confirms that her hypothesis was indeed correct. Defeating the Cateray has opened a disturbance in Qufim Island, which should allow us to connect to Abyssea's Altayu. We head for the disturbance and enter the alternate version of the celestial capital. Once stepping through the portal, we find none other than Abyssea's version of Preesh, who is shocked to see us. She tells us that our Abysseian counterpart had attempted and failed to stop Promethea's plot, and unfortunately fell in battle, leaving Preesh, an immortal being, trapped here in Altair with no recourse. She tells us that Prometheia has absorbed the darkness that was contained within Celtius, which has brought forward a physical manifestation of the Twilight God, the mighty worm god Shinryu. Seeing that we are indeed stronger than our Abysseian counterpart, Preesh entrusts us with the defeat of Shinryu. After the defeat of the physical manifestation of Prometheia, the destruction of Abyssea is seemingly halted. The scars he left on the land are going to take a long period of rebuilding before it resembles its former glory, though. Preesh decides to stay on Altair to keep watch over Abyssea forever. Joachim, Gilgamesh, and Escher and Tarl thank and congratulate us for averting yet another cataclysm, and Escher and Tarl asks us to visit Preesh from time to time, as the burden of her immortality has left her with the largest weight to bear in the recovery of their world. And with that, we've wrapped up the recap of the 3 Abyssea scenarios. They're pretty short, but they're nice and succinct, and I like that. Like most of the content, however, that was introduced during this period of the game, this story was seen as a pretty mid addition to the game, with a lot of people citing the reuse of characters, story beats, and villains as a pretty lazy way to inject content, not to mention Abyssea itself as a form of content and the areas that it brought with it were also received very poorly. This entire event completely shifted the way that the game played fundamentally. It changed the way that players leveled jobs, basically dismantling the traditional party up and grind method overnight. As a result, this time in Final Fantasy XI's history had a ton of attrition, with players quitting left and right. Overall, the Wings of the Goddess was not a good time for the game. And with that, I think I'll go ahead and wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.